Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Turning Digital Transformation into a Tangible Action Plan, a strategic discussion. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIM, and AIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are John Mancini from AIM and John Newton from Alfresco. And Alfresco is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we get started, I just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining the webinar live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. And across the bottom of your screen is a list of all the widgets that are available to you. And Group Chat is one of those widgets available to you, and you just open that by clicking on that Group Chat icon that is along the bottom. And with Group Chat, you'll be able to text, chat, communicate with each other, as well as with a few of us here at AIM. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout the hour using the Q&A feature, and that's to the left side of the slide area. And we will hold them until the end, where we should have about 5 or so minutes to answer them. You can also use this feature to ask for technical assistance. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list. And there's also a few other documents and links in there to help you learn more about what our speakers will be talking about today. So just click in there at any time. Those resources are going to open in a new browser tab, and you can save and read that information after the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, the brief survey will open in your browser, and would greatly appreciate it if you take a few moments to offer your feedback and suggest other topics for us to cover. And we are recording this webinar, and it's going to be posted to AIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. Now to introduce the speakers we have with us today. John Mancini is the Chief Evangelist and past President of AIM, and he is a well-known author and speaker on information management and digital transformation. As a frequent keynote speaker, John offers his expertise on digital transformation and the struggle to overcome information chaos. He blogs under the title Digital Landfill and has published more than 15 ebooks, many of which can be found at aim.org/research. John Newton is the CTO and founder of Alfresco. He's had a long and influential career in content management, including having been a board member and chair of the board of AIM. From 1990 to 2001, John co-founded, designed, and led the development of Documentum. He's also been an entrepreneur in residence at Benchmark Capital. And John was one of the founding engineers at Egress, where he helped develop the world's first commercial relational database. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to John Mancini to begin our discussion today. John?
Great. Thank you very much, Teresa. It's really a privilege to be here today with John. I've known John for a long time. As Teresa said, he used to be the chairman of the AIM board. He's also an AIM fellow. I give him an unofficial title, which I noticed that on the television last night that it's the 45th anniversary of the movie The Godfather. And so John's kind of the godfather of the content management space. And it's always a very enjoyable time to have an opportunity to sit down with him and exchange ideas on where the space is going and how content fits into some of the challenges that end-user organizations are having. So really appreciate him being here, and I think you'll enjoy it. We're going to try to keep this a little bit interactive. We have some slides that we wanted to go through, but we also want to make sure that we have time for conversation and also for your questions. So please don't hesitate to post them. So we're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to start first and talk a little bit about digital transformation, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail about 3 elements, design thinking, open collaboration, and platform thinking that tie to digital transformation. And so as we talk about digital transformation to start out, I think what I want to do here is talk about the Apple slogan, think differently, and I think that what digital transformation ultimately is all about is helping organizations think differently about their businesses and more particularly about how content interacts with those businesses and how content provides a set of tools and capabilities that are critical as organizations think through digital transformation challenges and how they become more responsive to their customers and to their employees and to their partners. And so then I think John's going to talk a little bit about also on the Think Differently side, and what he's going to do is talk about how digital leaders think differently and go through some interesting data associated with that. So disruption, as everybody knows, is on the top of every C-level list right now. This was a survey by Russell Reynolds and Associates of senior executives who anticipate, notice the words up here, moderate or massive digital disruption in the next 12 months. That's a pretty short window, which I think reflects the priority that people have in terms of thinking about their businesses in a different way than perhaps they traditionally have. And so that leads people to think differently, I think, ultimately about content. And we all know all the conversations that we've had over the last 12 to 18 months about ECM and some of the Gartner conversations about the shift from ECM to content services, and the Forrester conversations about the bifurcation in the market between business content services and transactional content services. But at the core, I think, content remains a critical element in a transformation strategy. We like to think of transformation as something that's focused on internal and external customer experiences. And all that conversation, I think, requires that we think differently about content management, and we have to think about content management in a broader frame. We at AIM happen to call that intelligent information management. And so as you think about this concept of thinking differently, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through all the detailed elements of this slide. I urge you to take a look at it after the webinar and reflect on it a little bit, because the way to think about this slide is essentially a roadmap to the kinds of information management capabilities that are critical for a digital transformation initiative. And so when organizations think about what they're trying to accomplish, if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, that's really the core thing that I think organizations are looking at in terms of capabilities. They're looking at modernizing the information toolkit that they have. They're looking at how do they digitalize their core organizational processes. They're thinking about how do they automate compliance and governance. And they're thinking about how do they leverage the next wave of analytics and machine learning in order to drive those customer experiences. All the boxes in orange are essentially the content services and information services that are necessary to drive all that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to John and to give us a little bit of a sense of how and why digital leaders think differently. So John?
Thanks, John. I'd like to talk about how digital leaders are thinking about this, because it isn't just about content, and it isn't just about technology either. This really is a radical shift in how we think about business. So we worked with Forbes Insight earlier this year to actually go and survey 328 senior executives in IT, many of which were CIOs from many different industries, technology, manufacturing, government, to see what they were thinking about digital transformation and what were they trying to accomplish and who were the leaders in the space. A few things came out very quickly. One is that it shouldn't be surprising, but if you're a fast-growing company, especially a new company, you're 3 times more likely to be successful in digital transformation. Also, when digital transformation starts from the top and the CEO leads that digital transformation, you're far more likely to be successful as well. Those who have had successful digital transformation initiatives have had the CEO leading it by approximately over half. And in addition, if it wasn't the CEO, it was very high up in the organization, not just somebody with a title digital in their on their business card. And when we surveyed them and asked them, what was it that you were trying to do with digital transformation? If we look at the whole cohort of the people that we were talking to, it was kind of all over the place. But in particular, digital transformation to them was simply simplifying or modernizing their IT infrastructure and also their applications. Also, improving or streamlining their business processes. Well, that's important, but that's more of an after effect. It's not just about those technology factors. Really what those digital leaders were trying to do is make it easier for customers, citizens, clients to do business with them, and then also make it easier for their suppliers, partners to do business with them as well. As a result of making it easier for customers, suppliers, their whole ecosystem to do business with them, they were using digital technology, and that became a factor in simplifying and modernizing IT infrastructure. Cause and effect is probably different than what you thought. There's a lot of other things that they were trying to do as well, and clearly becoming more agile is important, but it all comes down to being more responsive to the ecosystem in general. Also, as we started to delve into what were they doing differently, what were digital leaders doing differently, what we found in the surveys was that digital leaders are thinking differently about the problem. And it came down to 3 different types of thinking. First, there's design thinking, which is all about putting human beings at the center, not technology at the center of their digital transformation. Designing with the people that systems are intended to serve and iterating with them to be able to get the best results. It's also about open thinking as well. Open thinking not just in terms of open source or open APIs, but open architectures, and perhaps most important is open collaboration as well. Collaboration generally leads to innovation, and open thinking allows you to open up to new ideas, concepts, and also systems, and be able to access other systems. Openness just made them faster and more agile. And then third is perhaps one of the most profound transformations that are happening right now is around platform thinking. Thinking about your business not as a set of products, not as a brand or a logo, but as a platform to serve your ecosystem, to serve your customers, to provide them with the information and services that they need, and to be able to build a lasting relationship with your ecosystem and with your customers as a result of providing a better platform and a better way of doing business. So essentially new business models enabled by technology.
Thank you, John. That's a really good start into what we wanted to talk about. And so let me just dive into this concept of design thinking from my perspective and then get your take on it as well. And I think you really touched on the critical ingredient here, which is this idea that our focus is shifting from technologies to the actual experience that people have, to human beings. And a lot of that is being driven by mobile technologies. And mobile's not the end game. Mobile's just the first wedge, if you will. But it really is a fundamentally different focus from the way that we've always thought about enterprise technologies in the past, in which people and usability have been at the periphery rather than at the core. And so as you think about this, just a couple data points, just to wet our whistle a little bit in terms of thinking about how significant this change is. This is a picture of St. Peter's Square at the change of popes in 2005 and also in 2013. And you can see that there's something very fundamentally different here, which is the ubiquitous nature of mobile technologies in the bottom picture, and the spread of those technologies as essentially a brand new ecosystem, a brand new platform for not only conducting consumer business, but also conducting business itself. And so this little graph from Andreessen Horowitz, essentially reflects the fact that mobile is the fourth major platform, and the scale associated with mobile is so significantly different, and it is so personal and so people and human oriented that it really is starting a change in the way we think about technologies. And it's just the first wave, that's going to happen also with audio and with video and with voice. But it's a significantly new way, I think, thinking about what the challenges are associated with enterprise technologies. So, John, why don't you talk a little bit more about design thinking and kind of the experience that you had?
Yeah, so John and I were talking about this whole wave that's happened as a result of mobile. Mobile actually did change the way people think about how systems interact because form factor is smaller, it's always on, it's always there, and you had to think about the problem very differently. And consumers really got involved in this, but it's just the beginning as well. I was just at reInvent, AWS reInvent last week, where they're talking about voice and vision becoming the next wave in user design and user interface. So it really comes down to something a bit more fundamental about how you need to think about the problem, which is what do people want? Putting people at the center of this digital transformation. And so organizations that are focusing on user experience, customer experience, mobile experience, are really getting down to working with their end users to create a more impactful set of applications, digital interfaces that are kind of the foundation of a lot of the digital transformation. They also have dedicated UX designers working with the digital transformation organization. So as part of the survey, what we found is that there's a huge difference between those who are digital leaders and those who are just want to be digital transformation. I would say a majority are trying to explore digital transformation, but of those who are leaders, about 84% of digital leaders invest in user experience versus 45% of those who are not digital leaders. And in terms of the practices and actually hiring people to do it, there's just a huge difference between those. And it's going to get greater. So when you look at intentions over the next 2 to 3 years, those digital leaders are going to invest even more heavily in design thinking as one of the cornerstones of how they approach this. It isn't just about development. It's really about conversations with end users who are going to be using these systems. And if we look at what's actually going on, you don't start with your business analysis of information architectures and process designs, and you don't look at system topologies. You start with the people. You look at representative personas. You start to develop use cases and storyboards with real end users, talking it out, kind of sketching out what you're trying to accomplish with it. Then you start to bring in what are some of the information elements, what are some of the process designs, and talk it through with the end users. Then you can start to bring in the various systems and sources, and then ultimately you get to the digital solutions and products, which will be lightweight, agile, and rapidly develop these for specific purposes. Now, if you look at this kind of feedback loop, you'd probably recognize it as agile development, or some of the practices of lean enterprises, and that's absolutely true. In fact, those concepts are not just about development. They're really about business design and designing outcomes, and designing outcomes with the users, in order to serve those users more effectively. An example of an organization that is doing exactly that is one that's going straight to mobile, is going straight to more of a digital transformation of their whole business, is Capital One, and using design thinking for better customer engagement, starting off with their commercial customers and going into the retail. And there's huge benefits from doing this, which is all around customer loyalty and the ability to cross-sell. And looking at this, designing this from an end-to-end perspective, that the customer always has access to information, and their client team has a more holistic view of what's going on, and a more human-centric, a user-centric view of what's happening in that organization. So, as far as some of the industries that are buying into this right now, certainly financial services is one of the leaders, but it can really be applied to virtually anywhere.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, really interesting how this is changing. I was thinking about the banking business just in terms of our own interactions, and it's so dramatically different now than it was as recently as 2 or 3 years ago. And so the second thing that we want to talk about is this concept of openness and the relationship of openness to collaboration. And so as I was thinking about this, it was really reflecting upon the fact that we're really in the middle of the greatest explosion of innovation in history. And so, and I want to explore a little bit about why that is, and then talk a little bit about why that creates new demands for open thinking, why collaboration and why the rapid integration of new technologies becomes increasingly important in this environment. So as you think about this, this chart may be familiar to many of you. It's kind of the way many of us learned about innovation, the way that many of us thought about innovation for a long time. It's still very relevant. It's from Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma. And what the chart is all about is what happens to leaders within an industry as they are essentially undercut by newcomers that build a new value proposition that initially is at a value point that's less than the incumbents. But what they're able to do is acquire scale, and ultimately the pace of innovation takes over the incumbent players, and there's a shift that goes on. Now, the thing that's interesting about all the models that Clayton talked about in all of his books is that they were mostly focused on large, physical, capital-intensive kinds of businesses. And where we are now is a very different place, and a place in which some of the lessons from the Innovator's Dilemma start impacting our companies in much more rapid fashion than ever before, because they're basically involved in how we manage information, which has so many different elements in terms of how quickly you can scale and how quickly a business can be transformed by a very creative information-centric play. Just think about what happened with Uber, for example, in the taxi cab business. And so the elements of this, and I think the reason why openness and collaboration and integration of new technologies is so important is really captured. James McQuibby from Forrester in his book, I think, does a really good job of simplifying and talking about the ingredients of disruption. And his contention, which I agree with, is that the combination of these ingredients, a computer, an internet connection, programming languages and SDKs that are consistent, and a friction-free platform for distributing and making money, combine to create a very rich stew in which the pace of change accelerates. It creates a stew in which innovation can come from anywhere in the world, and it doesn't necessarily always come from the established and incumbent players. And so I think that really leads us down the path of thinking about what does that mean in terms of collaboration? What does that mean in terms of the integration of new technologies and services into your business?
Yeah, thanks, John. It is interesting, some of the concepts that Clayton Christensen did introduce, though, is that the people who were being disrupted had a very closed mindset about what was coming. Just kind of scoffed at the new generation of things that were happening. And clearly, you have to open your eyes to the huge amount of change that's happening right now. And that's why open thinking is so important, is, to avoid that groupthink, to extend out, to talk to your customers and make them part of developing new ideas, new concepts, new products, and new services. And really to be able to change the way you innovate. No one has a monopoly on good ideas. So the more that you can incorporate new ideas and concepts from outside the organization, and by outside the organization, that doesn't have to be outside the company. Just even talking to other organizations, you can see a huge difference between digital leaders and those who are not digital leaders. They open up internally and they open out to the outside. In fact, there's a real shift in attitudes right now because of the change in technologies. As one of our investors, Axel, one of the funders of Facebook as well, said that there's a real shift in openness, and they call it open access, because of developers, because of the need for speed, because of the level of scale and innovation through networks that's happening right now. Digital leaders are really jumping onto this and is transforming the way that they're building their systems and building their business. We can also see that there's a real inclination toward adopting open source, open standards, open APIs, open data, open architectures, where we see almost 90% of digital leaders adopting open source. And it's only increasing right now. In fact, the level of adoption of open systems versus closed systems is just tremendously different than it was just a few years ago. So what we see is the opportunity to innovate and collaborate to come up with ideas. Why reinvent the wheel? Why do what others are doing? Focus on those things that are strategic to your business. And we can see that open source can play a really important role because other people are creating infrastructure, utilities, creating new services, new ways of integrating information and systems across the board, both inside and outside the organization, introducing even new capabilities such as artificial intelligence or deep learning or even blockchain capabilities to work out transactions in completely different ways. And also what's changed over the last couple of years as well is the notion that user experience is not being created on proprietary systems, but in open systems. Just a few years ago, that was rather surprising, whereas today it's very open, and open source is really driving this. And open source plays a really important role in also driving open standards and open APIs, encouraging that collaboration between organizations. Open source is really kind of the essence of collaboration. And we can look at organizations like FINRA, which is the Financial Regulatory Agency, providing regulatory services of the banks, is really opening up the way that they're working by not using closed proprietary systems, but open systems and open APIs, working with the people who fund them, which are the banks, and the ones that they're actually regulating as well, and deploying these in the cloud to be able to take on the trillions of transactions and the millions of customer complaints, and being able to adapt quickly for any regulatory challenge that comes up, including some that can be predicted, which is on an annual basis, sometimes are a lot more busy than others, as well as new crises that may come up, and to be able to adapt to them as quickly as possible. So really, openness is not just open source or open collaboration. It's really a mindset that says access is everything.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it really leads very naturally into this last point that we wanted to talk about is this concept of platform thinking. And you and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, and we talked about the concept of your business, and you mentioned it again earlier in this webinar, that your business, viewing your business as a platform to serve your ecosystem. And how does that change the way that you look at the business? How does that change the way that you look at technology capabilities? And what does it mean in terms of the toolkit, if you will, that you need to have in order to actually create a platform that is attractive? So as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, it's a holiday season. These people seem to show up at my doorstep about every 20 minutes with a package. And so I thought I'd go to the mother of all platforms and kind of reflect a little bit about platform thinking from that perspective and think about it from the Amazon perspective. So this is a profile of perhaps, as I say, the mother of all platforms, the Uber platform, Uber in a different context. And these are some data points from Scott Galloway's new book called The Four. And actually, for those of you looking for a nice Christmas gift, it's a really good, albeit a bit snarky, view of technology companies and technology platforms. But it's really interesting, makes you think a little bit about kind of the directions that we've all collectively gone down. And so as you look at these data points, you can see the byproduct at a very large scale of what it means to be a dominant platform, what it means to be the platform of choice. And if you look even further, look a little bit more at this, and you look at, say, market capitalization, and this is also from Scott's book, and you look at the market capitalization of Amazon, which is on the right-hand side, and then you look at a lot of other companies that you would think of as being major consumer companies, everybody from Walmart to Target to Kroger, you can kind of go down the list there. You can get a sense of the dominant role that Amazon plays as a result of strategically thinking about what it means to have a platform play. And so the last piece, and this is also another really good book. I always love Andy McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson's books, and this most recent one is called Machine, Platform, and Crowd. And they talk about platform thinking, and they talk about the characteristics of platform players. And they go through things like they're usually early to the space. They usually think about how they extend their initial model to complementary goods wherever possible. They open up their platforms to a broad range of contributors. And they try to curate and use the information on their platforms to create a consistent and positive experience for the participants. And so I think that really drives to, kind of a point that brings all this together. John was talking earlier about openness. He was talking about collaboration. That's clearly a part of this. And I think as we get into platform thinking, it really focuses on the need for agile and scalable and modular capabilities that can interact and be built upon each other quickly and effectively in order to make sure that the platform actually works the way that you want it to. So, John, spend a little time talking about platform thinking.
Yeah, actually, a conference that opened up with Andrew McAfee at the MIT Media Lab a couple of years ago is really what got me thinking about platform thinking. It was the Platform Thinking Conference. And if you have the opportunity, I would absolutely recommend going to those conferences. It's an annual conference. And really, it's about harnessing the power and scale of your digital capabilities to be able to rapidly create new digital initiatives, to create a platform to engage your customers, which is one of the prime motivations for digital transformation. It's about provisioning your internal capabilities and information to external parties, and also to consume services and information from external parties as well. So basically building up the ecosystem. And what we found with digital leaders is that it's kind of a new thing to think about platform thinking. Yeah, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons are some of the most valuable companies in the world, are clear platforms, and emerging ones of Uber and Airbnb as well. Huge valuation because low capital requirements and huge opportunities. Now, it isn't just about those technology companies as well. Right now, when we surveyed, 40% are starting to provision their internal capabilities. That's not most, but it's getting there, and digital leaders are leading this by a factor of about 40% to 30% in terms of providing APIs and access to that. But 90% of digital leaders intend to dramatically increase this in the next couple of years. So basically, everybody will become digital or become platform companies to some extent, and it's part of becoming a digital company. When McKinsey talks about digital transformation, they do it from the perspective of platforms, looking at your core capabilities as platforms for agility, growth, and resilience, and then to be able to provide those services and all the resources in the company with open data, open APIs, open standards and architectures to quickly build digital initiatives, whether it's a new Internet of Things initiative or it's a public policy initiative to be able to deliver information to constituents, or if it's to be able to create new customer services. That's the way to think about a platform. And also, openness is driving a lot of innovation in that platform. By having reusable services, it allows us to introduce new user experiences, new scale, new artificial intelligence and analytics and blockchain. And openness, open source, is really taking and extending those concepts. Now, when we go back to something like financial services again, Bank of New York Mellon is looking at their capabilities as a platform. In fact, all the banks are starting to think of themselves as APIs. Why? To empower their clients, to give them the visibility of their transactions, to eliminate all that manual intervention and interaction of what's going on between client and bank, to just streamline that whole process and integrate the ecosystem together. And really that's happening in a number of different industries, not just banking, but manufacturing and airlines. It's all about providing data and access to customers to make the customer experience better. So this is really an opportunity for you to really change your thinking, to apply these just as the digital leaders have done, to be able to take design thinking and apply it to more people-centric experiences, to take open thinking, to be able to support transparency, innovation and change, and drive adaptability and competitive advantage, and then platform thinking to accelerate the development of new digital initiatives and to be able to reuse your capabilities and really redesign your experiences as well to increase agility and maximize your resources. So let me tell you a little bit about Alfresco and what we're doing with digital transformation. We were founded in 2005. We are open source. We're very community driven with lots of partners built around that community with thousands, tens of thousands of developers building applications using open source, and to be able to take and provide a better experience. So you can go ahead and try it yourself, download it, and if you like the capabilities and want to be able to extend it into production environments, then we're there to be able to take and support you, just like thousands of customers have done as well. And I believe that what makes us unique is that we're applying those three types of thinking around design thinking, accelerating time to value by working with end users and making it easy for you to work with end users to be able to build, deploy, and use useful and easy user interfaces and new digital initiatives. Applying open thinking with a modern open architecture that's cloud-ready, developer-friendly. And to apply platform thinking as well, that the capabilities you need are, yes, content, but also process, governance, and a whole lot of other things, but being able to integrate it in such a way that you can create your own platform for your own digital business initiatives, and to create your own business platform, of which content and process are going to be important parts to this overall. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more, we've got a few links here, and also the resources will be available on the site as well, where you can go ahead and download more information about this and to be able to drill into this. But I believe we have some time to maybe answer some questions that people might have. John?
Teresa, why don't you kind of go through, and I think there were some questions that people made.
Yeah.
Why don't you act as MC here?
Sure thing. And just as John Newton mentioned, that those the links on this page, they are available to you right now in that resources list section that's to the right of the slide area. So go ahead and click those links. They'll open in another tab for you, and after the webinar, you can save them off and read them because it's some really good information that's being shared in there. So I encourage you to do that. I want to start with one of the questions here, and let me start with John Newton on this one. Regarding your section on platform thinking, does that mean that products are no longer relevant?
Well, it's interesting that conference that I went to on platform thinking actually talked about platform trumps product. That products are sort of an outcome of the platforms, but there's just so much opportunity to engage in customers and build a lasting experience that it becomes less important. And you can see transformation of companies like General Electric, where, yeah, they're manufacturers, so they're going to be building products. But Predix is going to become the basis for future revenue growth, where they sell products, and the profits aren't going to be made on the products. The profits are going to be made on the annuity stream of maintenance and relationship with the customers longer term. Creating digital twins to be able to predict when potential failures are happening, to be able to make diagnostics a lot simpler. So I don't think products go away, but actually in the long run, platforms become more important than products, because it's just impossible for a product company to keep up with a platform company. And those who don't take that advice could end up in the same place as some of the competitors of Amazon, Airbnb, and Uber, and others.
I think it's really interesting, John, when you think about that whole question of platforms and products as the information component of a product becomes more and more pronounced. It's almost like the product is not unimportant, but it extends the value proposition much more broadly than just the product itself, which then I think creates a need for thinking about all the different capabilities associated with managing and leveraging the information associated with a product in a way that starts to become a platform. And I think I'm really attracted to platform thinking as well. It really makes you think very, very differently about products because it creates those connection points that don't really exist often in organizations right now. So if for example, if you have a very product-centric kind of view of the world, you tend to have a lot of silos. You tend to have a lot of product responsibility that doesn't cross over into other products. You tend to have a lot of customer service stuff that's disconnected from the product development stuff. But when you start thinking about a product being a starting point for a set of customer experiences, it's a really different kind of way of looking at the world that I think is very powerful.
Yeah, they're going to be inseparable, the product and the platform, and either you control the platform or you don't. So we're having an alfresco day here in London, where one of our speakers from one of the major banks is going to be talking about the fact that what's happening to banks is that they're at risk of becoming product companies, delivering their products into other platforms.
Yeah, which is a very risky place to be, I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about banks as a good example, or checking accounts and savings accounts and all. It's all kind of almost secondary now when you think about this. A lot of that stuff has become so commoditized. It actually becomes the key part becomes the overall experience of how that platform is used to manage and leverage the resources that you have.
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump in here with another question that we have from our audience members. And John Mancini, let me first direct this towards you. Did the survey of digital transformation and the people who consider themselves laggards, did that survey suggest any mistakes that these organizations are making?
Well, I think I haven't gone in total detail into the survey yet, but my experience when we talk to people about digital transformation is that it's unfortunately become one of those labels that can apply to a lot of different circumstances. And so, we have everything under the sun being called digital transformation these days. And I think what John was talking about in that survey is really important because it involves it involves more than tactical process improvement. It involves more than customer relationships. It involves thinking about your business in a new way and utilizing new technology tools to help you do so. And so I think the mistake that people make is that in an environment where there are so many definitions of digital transformation, I think often organizations tend to fall back on the easy stuff, which they should be doing anyway. I mean, they should be doing process improvement anyway. But in my mind, digital transformation is not continuous process improvement, which is what people should be doing anyway. It's thinking about your business through the eyes of customers and employees and partners and thinking about the business in new ways. And technology is a tool to get there, but it's that thought process that I think becomes the ability to envision your business in different ways is, I think, what differentiates the successful organizations from the laggards. John, you must have run into some stuff along the way there.
Yeah, so it was kind of fun. There was a lot of data in that survey to be able to do some analytics on, really slice and dice the data. But I think I hopefully we got across some of the most important parts. One is, where's the focus of your digital transformation? Is it merely looking at it as a technology change because everybody else is changing their technology, or is it because you're trying to make your business better? You're trying to serve your customer better, and those digital initiatives that focus on that are going to be the most successful. The other is, pushing this as just another IT initiative and pushing it down the organization. Digital transformation really should be a board-level discussion, and in successful companies, it absolutely is. In fact, a lot of boards are looking at this as an existential problem that needs to be addressed, recognizing that the disruptors are coming, and disrupt or die is pretty much what needs to go on. And I would think also, avoiding these three types of thinking, and actually statistically, perhaps one of the most important was around design thinking right now, which is not focusing on the user, thinking of, user experience as something that you add on the end rather than making it intrinsic to your digital initiatives is a huge mistake. It's not a nice to have, it's an absolute must as part of your digital transformation.
John, another question related to what you guys are just talking about here. Someone says that they're in the government sector because you said it needs to start at the board level. How does this apply to government agencies?
Oh, well, the whole notion of open government, e-government, and whatever has been, pretty important, especially, when your agencies are under attack, from political forces. You have to be showing value to the citizens. But also, there's an outcome that comes from this as well, which is that it's just far more efficient for everybody, for government, for citizens, for organizations that are going on. And therefore, it becomes an agency-level discussion, So head of agency, head of department is often driving these things the same way that a CEO would be doing it as well. To say that, especially, the more scientific an organization is, the more likely it is to pick this up. So you see NASA kind of leading a lot of these digital government initiatives, but not just NASA. Anybody with a lot of citizen interaction and engagement, citizens just have really high expectations, and it's probably the only way to address the next generation's requirements of, the millennials' desire to get things done and not really putting up with the old paperwork ways of doing things. and the faceless ways of doing things as well, to have a better experience. There is an example as well where the Veterans Administration was under huge pressure, but using the concept of design thinking, recognizing that all veterans are not alike, creating personas has been able to dramatically improve how they serve veterans and both their medical needs and their benefits as well.
Well, thank you. I need to touch on a couple of other things here. This has been a fantastic conversation. And just wanted to mention that the AIM 2018 conference is coming up very soon in April of 2018 down in San Antonio, Texas. And we're going to have some exciting keynote speakers lined up along with a lot of great educational sessions as well as a lot of roundtable discussions. Those are so popular. So for more information, go to aimconference.com. And we have been listening to John Mancini of AIM and John Newton of Alfresco. And since we are at the end of the webinar hour, just want to remind everyone that the webinar has been recorded. It is going to be available the next couple of days for you. Download those resources. Please take a few moments to take the survey that's going to pop up when the webinar ends. Value your feedback tremendously. And very much want to thank our underwriter, Alfresco. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM would not be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinar series. So thank you, Alfresco, for your sponsorship. But just as we bring this webinar to a close, I just want to leave everyone with our speakers' closing thoughts or key takeaways. So I'm going to begin first with John Newton from Alfresco. Your closing thoughts today.
Well, having thought about digital transformation for quite a while, I know that technology is not standing still. We're constantly amazed by it. I just got a whole dose of artificial intelligence that's coming down the pike that's going to have a huge impact on everything that we've been discussing. Also, new ways of doing transactions. But it really comes down to an open attitude and a different way of thinking about this. So really do take on board the importance of design, openness, and platforms, because no matter how fast technology changes, that will probably be the foundation for building a better business or a better governmental organization.
Thank you. And John Mancini from AIM, your closing thoughts today.
I think just very quickly, just first of all, thank you, John and Alfresco, for being a part of this. Whenever I have a conversation with John, I always a couple things occur to me that like, wow, I didn't think of things that way, and that was certainly the case for me today. And I think a couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned, we started talking about platform thinking, and it had been something that had been on my mind. And I guess my takeaway would be I would really encourage people to think about that, because I think it's a different way of thinking about the world. And whether you start with Scott Galloway's book or whether you start with Andy McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson's book, really think about that question of what platform thinking means and how it changes the way that you think about not only the business but about the systems that are necessary to knit the business together. So if you're looking for something to do over the holidays, think about platform thinking.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. This is the end of our webinar, and so for AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you next week. Have a good afternoon.